There was confusion all around following at both the Spanish and Monaco Grand Prix, where Daniel Ricciardo was desperately searching for the pace that he seemed to have lost this year. He couldn't find any, finishing 12th and 13th respectively as his McLaren career took another downturn. Let's look at Daniel Ricciardo's recent problems and why his future at McLaren is in doubt. Making matters worse, teammate Lando Norris scored 8th in Spain and 6th in Monaco, despite suffering from illness. And if you're perplexed this week about how and why one of the most talented drivers on the grid is still not up to speed at McLaren, you're not alone. It's a head-scratcher, said 1996 world champion Damon Hill on Sky Sports. If you're driving and you're being outpaced, it's a problem. It's a head-scratcher. You start to think, maybe that's just a fact of life I'm going to have to live with. I'm not as quick as my teammates. And how do you get on with it? Meanwhile, McLaren has been congratulating itself on a major upgrade package that went off without a hitch. McLaren released several new parts, including upgrades to the floor, side pods, diffuser, brake duct, and circuit-specific front and rear wings. All worked well for Norris, according to technical director James Key. It's correlated to everything we expected. I think from what CFD and Wind Tunnel told us, it's come out on track, which is always good to see. If everything did indeed go to plan, then McLaren and Ricciardo are worlds apart. His latest drop following the introduction of a major upgrade package could be purely coincidental, but the timing is difficult to dismiss. The Spanish Grand Prix was a rare positive for Ricciardo in the first half of 2021, with the fact that it is a pre-season testing venue, no doubt contributing to his added comfort at the time. However, this year has been a nightmare that has cast doubt on the Ricciardo-McLaren partnership and their ability to move forward together. Given his driving preferences and the erratic nature of McLaren's speed, Ricciardo was expected to struggle for much of 2021. Nevertheless, the Australian stood to benefit from an entire year of team development, wholesale rule changes, and a full season in the McLaren cockpit in 2022. He undoubtedly made progress last year, but it appears he has reached a snag. And according to Sky Sports commentator and former F1 driver Paul di Resta, Ricciardo will be feeling the pressure to perform. I guess the disappointing thing for him is he went through the end of last generation of Formula One and struggled against Lando. He's gone into this generation, completely different driving style, completely different car, and how it delivers the lap time, and he's still a little bit behind him. And Ricciardo entered 2022 determined to put his disappointing first season with McLaren behind him, but the first 6 races haven't gone as planned, and a remark he made after finishing a disappointing 12th in the Spanish Grand Prix hinted that his future with the team might not be as simple as it once appeared. When asked if he had begun talks with McLaren about 2023, Ricciardo said he hadn't, but added, "I'm sure we'll talk before the summer, but we haven't talked about when we'll talk." Yet last February, Ricciardo confirmed he had a 3-year contract with McLaren, but when asked why such talks were necessary, given that he said last year it was a 3-year deal, Ricciardo uncharacteristically struggled for words. That's true, so maybe you've just made me answer something I don't even need to answer. That is true, so maybe I meant 2023 summer. When further questions were posed, Ricciardo wisely declined to elaborate. While it could simply be a driver who had just spent over an hour and a half struggling in sweltering conditions misspeaking, it could also indicate that his McLaren future is not set in stone. Regardless of whether Ricciardo inadvertently hinted at something or was simply being imprecise in his response to questions, McLaren is now forced to seriously consider his future with the team. The hope was that after a year of hard work deconstructing his driving and improving his technical understanding, Ricciardo would be back to his brilliant best in 2022. Given the dramatic rule changes, the stage appeared set for a comeback, with Ricciardo potentially performing even better than before. But given Lando Norris's advantage, it looked a lot like much of 2021 so far, with him being the clear number 2. And the data supports that. Ricciardo trails his teammate by 39 to 11 points, is 5-1 in the qualifying head-to-head, and has only been ahead of him once in the 4 races they both finished. And that still wasn't the result of Norris's strategic gamble in Bahrain, on a weekend when McLaren was well off the pace. The Spanish Grand Prix was the low point of Ricciardo's season. Although Ricciardo was the only McLaren driver to qualify for Q3, this was due to Norris's final Q2 lap time being deleted. Norris had been 0.31 seconds faster before losing that lap for a track limits violation that conferred little, if any, lap time advantage. The underlying pace difference has been present all season in qualifying, to the point where Ricciardo believes that 0.3 is the third best gap between the two. However, the race was a whole new level of disappointing, with Ricciardo finishing 12th and his race pace was nowhere near Norris's. They used similar strategies, with 3 stints on softs and 1 on mediums, though Ricciardo used mediums in the second stint and Norris in the third, but the average lap time difference was more than 0.8 of a second. This is out of proportion to the apparent pace difference between the two on Friday and Saturday. Ricciardo was perplexed by the fact that he had a lower grip than everyone else and hoped that the problem would be discovered to explain it. McLaren is still investigating, and given Ricciardo's struggles in the race, it would be surprising if a problem wasn't discovered. But while Ricciardo stated that there were minor differences between his and Norris's setups, such a large disparity could not be explained. I hope to find something else, like an "oh wow, this was wrong," or "this was something." When there's setup differences, you could say there's a couple of tenths, but I was just really slow. This felt more than setup, so hopefully there's something, because I'm experienced enough now to try different things throughout the race. I tried to push on the tires, tried to be conservative, approach the corners in different ways, but the net lap time at the end was the same each time I crossed the line, whether I used the tires or not. So one of those ones where you're just kind of scratching your head. Even if McLaren does figure out what was causing Ricciardo's problems, it won't change the overall trend. A driver on a lucrative contract simply hasn't delivered the level of performance expected by McLaren, the watching world, or Ricciardo's own illustrious F1 career. His issues from last year were well documented, with the style he'd honed in previous years in F1 not matching up with a car that didn't provide him with the turning characteristics he required. He worked hard to re-engineer his style, and while he had some success, he was never able to recapture his old form. This year's first 6 races have followed the same pattern as the second half of last year. While the car's fundamental challenges offered the tantalizing prospect of a fresh start, the inherent characteristics don't necessarily favor Ricciardo. With front-end load difficult to produce for slower corners, the change may be untimely. Ricciardo admits he still has a long way to go. The impression is of a driver who can't seem to find his way back to his former heights, and while it's always risky to speculate on what's going on in someone else's head, may even be asking himself if he can. I've definitely done enough miles now, so I don't think it's necessarily just more laps anymore. It's probably just driving, or perhaps a little deeper. But some circuits, it kind of feels natural or at home, and then others, I seem to just struggle a little bit more sometimes, so I'm still trying to figure it out sometimes. To be continued. Nobody can deny Ricciardo's efforts to turn things around at McLaren, but the signs of progress are patchy at best. With drivers like Colton Herta and Pato Oward on the horizon, as well as potential alternatives elsewhere in F1, McLaren must be wondering if it's time to cut its losses on Ricciardo for 2023. Ricciardo has not lived up to expectations, as McLaren CEO Zak Brown admitted this week. Lando definitely has an edge. We obviously would like to see Daniel much closer to Lando and have a good intra-team battle. Daniel's just not comfortable yet with the car. We're trying everything we can, and again, it was a disappointing weekend. Short of Monza and a few races, it's generally not met his or our expectations as far as what we're expecting. All you can do is keep working hard as a team, keep communications going, keep pushing, and hope that whatever's not clicking at the moment clicks here shortly. In response to Brown's remark, Ricciardo insists that he believes he belongs at the front of the F1 and can overcome his current difficulties. It's not false, it's pretty true. Firstly, comments I don't take personal. My skin is tan, beautiful, and also thick. No one's going to be harder on me than myself, and I know that I don't want to be racing around 10th to 12th place. I still believe I can be at the front and belong at the front, so it's been a little bit more certainly testing at times, in terms of trying to get up and maximize myself in this car. But we're working together hard, and the team want it, I want it, so we're just working through it. Ricciardo turns 33 in July, and may still have many years ahead of him as an F1 driver, given that his exploits have thrilled F1 for many years, and he has accomplished great things with 8 victories in 2 seasons, 2014 and 16, where you can make a strong case that he was the best F1 driver of the season. The hope is that peak Ricciardo is still in there, somewhere waiting to get back to his best. Certainly, Grand Prix racing would benefit from his presence, as he is capable of being a great driver and an excellent ambassador for F1. The hope is that things will click, and that the popular Ricciardo will have 5 years or more ahead of him as a driver at his peak. But the question is whether he has what it takes to turn things around, both in terms of ability and determination, and McLaren's willingness to persevere. If one or both of those things are missing, it is possible that when time comes to talk about the future, it will be about the team and the driver splitting up. There are 2 clear candidates to replace Ricciardo, the first of which is Colton Herta. The IndyCar driver recently signed a contract with McLaren for testing and development as he strives for a spot on the F1 starting grid. Brown may also look to Herta to capitalize on the newly discovered U.S. audience, eager to see an American driver on the grid. Brown recently stated that the team has a plan in place for the 22-year-old, implying that he will be an important part of the team squad in the future. Brown even admitted that if he keeps up good performances, he might get a chance to drive in Formula One. He stated, "Colton has to be super fast, fun, and enjoyable to work with, and he has to be very good in his technical feedback. If he does all of that, when a seat becomes available, he's in with the shot." Pato Oward is another option for McLaren. The Mexican has just signed a new contract with McLaren's IndyCar team that will keep him there until 2025. His new contract, however, will include additional seat time in F1 cars after he participated in the end-of-season Young Drivers Test in Abu Dhabi last season. Brown confirmed that Oward would definitely be included in the team's F1 testing program, keeping him firmly in play. Oward has openly declared his love for F1 and stated that he would like to make the switch within the next few years. "My dream of becoming a racing driver came about in Formula One. It's what opened your heart to such a different world." Do you believe Daniel Ricciardo has a bright future with McLaren, or do you believe they'll part ways at the end of the season? Lando Norris has been outstanding in comparison to his teammate thus far. Will Daniel mount a comeback? Leave your thoughts in the comment section down below.